Chase McGrath for the win for the Volunteers. From 40. On the way, a knuckleball. He got it! And here they come.
College football, arguably one of the most intense sports in the world. Like many sports, it is empowered by the tenacity of the fans. The excitement you feel on Saturday before kickoff, the fever of anxiety as the band plays your team's fight song, the roaring of the crowds as the players and coaches storm onto the field, the screams of delight when your team wins on game day, and the feeling of agony when they don't. These emotions only scratch the surface of what college football fans get ready to enlighten themselves to every weekend in the fall. Each and every fan has a different story about what makes them so attracted to the game. What you are about to see is some of the many experiences college football fans have had and how they got into the sport to begin with. You are about to see what college football means to fans, what college football means to us. Every college football fan has a beginning, a story that pulled them into the sport. How did you get into college football?
I was basically born in Oklahoma, and all my family members were born in Oklahoma too. My brother was born in Tennessee, which he's obviously not a Tennessee fan. He doesn't really care, but I care. But my dad went to optometry school in Tennessee. That's what made me a Tennessee fan as well.
Well, I remember growing up, I can remember my papa actually riding around on a tractor with a transistor radio on the tractor, listening to John Ward and the Tennessee Vols. So it was ingrained in my soul early. My dad took me to see Bernie and Ernie play.
My dad was raised in Michigan, Adrian, Michigan, and ever since he was raised there, he was a Michigan fan all along since the Bo Schembechler, I can't pronounce it, but Big Bo was there in Ann Arbor, and he was a fan of the Michigan Wolverines. Well, that's how I got the, Michigan.
Well, I grew up in Alexandria, Louisiana, born and raised there, and so everybody in that part of Louisiana, and probably mostly all over Louisiana, big LSU Tiger fans. Go Tigers. Moved to Knoxville in 1989, and the culture's similar. Big stadium, big giant arena, rabid fans that love their football. The tailgating is kind of like LSU's. It's a big, big thing even before the game. So a lot of similarities there.
I was like 2 or 3. My mom, who's an Alabama fan, used to put me in like Alabama sweaters and try to make me an Alabama fan. But at the end of the day, for some crazy reason, my dad, who I loved more, to be honest with you, made me an Auburn fan. So I just love Auburn. I love their colors. Orange and blue just seems like a good color for anything.
The thing I can remember was that my first game was Tennessee, Alabama, 1995, Legion Field, Birmingham, Alabama. And we were sitting in the Tennessee section. And I just remember, even though it was at Alabama, just like all the Tennessee fans going crazy. Like I can't remember like a lot of things about that game, but I can remember just being in the Tennessee section in Birmingham and just kind of like going crazy, play number 1, Peyton Manning to Joey Kent. And ever since then, I just,
Normally, if you're born in the state of Georgia, you're automatically by default a Georgia fan. Well, not for me. I'm a Tech fan for sure all the way. I grew up going to the games and doing tailgates, and those are some memories I have of doing that. So, Yellow Jackets all the way for
Absolutely.
sure.
Well, when you grow up in this state, I was born in this state, I live in the Charleston area. It doesn't take long before you're either indoctrinated or swayed one way or another to become either a Clemson or a South Carolina fan. Almost everybody that I knew growing up had a sibling or an uncle or an aunt or maybe their parents that went to one of those two schools if they were from this state. My oldest sister, who's 14 years older than me, was the first one in our family to go to Clemson, and that was in the mid-'80s. So I was very young. I was 4 or 5 years old. So she brought me up there one weekend, but I remember walking into that stadium as a very young boy and just by being hooked from the start.
Well, I went there as a freshman, as I mentioned, and I joined the school's marching band. And back at that point, I didn't really know much about sports. It was like, okay, football, touchdown, that's pretty much all I knew. That's pretty much it. And then over the course of the year, I began to realize what like rooting for the team meant. It was just like the environment was in the stadium was pretty decent. But the real thing that made me a fan was rooting for them in November against Maryland. They had 2 wins in 3 games, and they beat Maryland. It was just a really close, intense game. It made me more of a fan. On top of that, the travel opportunities that being in the band presented, provided the football team was good. Unfortunately, I did not get to go to a bowl game that year, but realizing that good football team equals good travel opportunities, I became really invested.
My dad grew up in the Nashville area. Despite actually growing up an NC State fan, he became a Vandy fan, and my family's had season tickets to football for 26 years.
My dad, when I was little growing up, he had season tickets. He'd take me to the games. We'd go tailgate and just experiencing that growing up and like sitting watching the games with them whenever he didn't go, like, or if they were on the road, sitting watching the games with them growing up just made me a fan. And I grew up during the Spurrier years.
I've always loved the weather, and I have a bunch of friends who graduated with a meteorology degree from Mississippi State. That's one. Also, number 2 is that, Sylvester Croom is a family friend. His father used to come into one of our meat processing plants way back in the 60s and 70s. And so we've been real close with the Crooms. And so when Sylvester Croom took the job over there at Mississippi State, since he was a local boy, I said, well, since we know him, I'm probably going to become a fan. And it just grew from there.
I didn't grow up watching college football. My dad was more of an NFL guy. So like on the weekends in my house when I was a kid, the Falcons would be on Sundays. Saturdays, we didn't really watch that much football on Saturdays. But when I got into high school, and then really more so my first couple of years of college, I had a bunch of friends that were into college football. Georgia was the team. And so that's really when it started. I went to my first game in like 6th grade, I think. A friend of mine took me. His parents had season tickets. I'd never been to an NFL or a college game. If I started watching college football after that, I still remember one of the first college football games I ever watched on TV. It was a bowl game between Miami and Penn State. And I can't remember the year. It was in the late 80s, though. And so I just and I was playing football at the time, too, as a kid, like, rec league football and then middle school football on to high school. So I started watching more football as I got into football personally. And more of my friends were into college than the NFL. So I started watching more and more college. And that's kind of how it all started.
My grandfather was a cop in Austin in the 90s. And when I first started playing youth sports, I was playing football, and he popped in a tape of Earl Campbell back in the olden days, and I watched, and that's about the time Ricky Williams was bursting on the scene, so I gravitated towards them.
I was introduced to it at a young age, and just watching it on TV and watching it in person, I just absolutely fell in love with it. It was really the only college football team I was exposed to, and it's really the only one I've known to root for the longest time I've been alive, ever since I was born almost.
I went up to my mama's one time, and she had the Tennessee versus Utah State game on in 2014, and I I was like, what's this? And she's like, oh, it's football. And I'm like, what? And then I'm just sitting here watching, and she's teaching me the rules and everything. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. So, so yeah, you could thank my mama for getting me interested in football.
My first game, actually, it was actually a pretty rough first game to go to, but it was actually a loss in Death Valley to Matt Ryan back in 2007. That was my first Clemson game I went to in person when he led a comeback and beat us in the final minute. So, you know, I love the atmosphere. I've like fell in love with the school, the university, and just I've been a fan all my life, and I eventually got my degree. So from them. So
growing up as a kid, I'd always see that crimson and white. Always saw that beautiful A, always saw that elephant, and I started, you know, making sense, sports and stuff, and I was growing up and, you know, 3 to 5, making sense of what all that was, and it was fascinating, and I couldn't believe, and it dawned on me. I'm thinking, oh my God, I live in the heart of college football. I live in the heart of it all.
As a fan of your favorite team, it's very likely you were pulled into attending a game in person. What was that experience like, and how did it impact your fanhood?
That I've attended live, it's easy for me. It's a no-brainer. It's the 1995 Tennessee-Alabama game in Birmingham. I was a grown man, and my brother was there with me, and one of my good friends from North Carolina flew in. We went to the game, and it was amazing seeing Peyton hit Joey Kent for play number 1, and then it was on from there.
We went to the Vanderbilt game, which was a night game around 6 o'clock, and it was a great experience. So I can finally say that I've been to a game.
2016, when we beat our most hated rivals, the Georgia Bulldogs, for sure. That was in Athens, and there was not many of us there. And as it stands now, that is the last time my Yellow Jackets have beat the Bulldogs.
Must have been a spectacular moment to embrace.
Absolutely.
I consider all of them really great, but the one that always will stand out to me, the one that always holds a special place in my heart, is 2014 Florida-Georgia. That was my first ever Florida-Georgia game. And if you look at that game, the week leading up to that game, nobody expected us to win that game. I mean, we were 500 going into that game, and Georgia was ranked 11 with 1 loss. First ever Florida Georgia game was a memorable experience. Probably one of my favorite experiences as a Florida fan, and definitely my favorite game I've ever been to.
Probably the 4 overtime Red River rivalry in Dallas. We came up on the losing end, but you know, just probably one of the most thrilling games I've ever been to in my life.
Probably my first ever Power 5 game with Pittsburgh, because, you know, I've never been to a Power 5 team. I've never been to a Power 5 game, and seeing Hooker come in for the first time, a QB that I've always believed in, and being able to see him compete and all that, it was pretty nice and satisfying.
The best one I attended, LSU versus Alabama 2022. I stormed the field at that game.
Gosh, that's hard to say. Probably the best overall was in 1998, the year that Tennessee won the national championship. We were at the game where we beat Florida, my wife and I. Like 108,000 people. I can't remember if it's the record, but it's close to the record of most people in Neyland Stadium, and I've never heard it that loud in my life.
I was at the Georgia-Tennessee game in 2000 when the goalpost came down. I don't know. I don't know if you got. I don't know if you were at the Bama game or not, but I don't care who anybody is a fan of. I'll remember that experience to the day I die. That's the only time it's ever happened at Sanford Stadium, and I just happened to be there. A buddy of mine actually. I told you I had a lot of friends that were into college football. Well, one of them was a huge Tennessee fan. One of my best friends growing up, big Tennessee fan. Me and him actually went to the game. We had tickets in the Georgia student section, but then in the fourth quarter, we got out of the student section and walked down to the other end. Because everyone, it was just known if Georgia won that game, they were going to rush the field and tear the goalpost down. And Georgia intercepted a pass with like a minute and a half to go in the game, and the floodgates just opened. Everybody came out onto the field. They had to stop the game for like 10 minutes to get all the students and everything off the field. One of the goalposts, the last minute of the game, one of the goalposts was already halfway down.
Let's see. I was at the Nicholls State game in 2016 when we almost lost. It was a good game, but of course, we didn't want a good game. But
2005, Alabama's coming in ranked, I believe they were 11th in the country. They had quarterback Brody Croyle, who is now working for the Crimson Tide Sports Network. I work at a radio station not too far from here, and sometimes I get to cover Alabama football, and I can hear him talk all the time. Tommy Tuberville is the head coach for Auburn at the time. In every game that year, Alabama threw on the first play of the game, and every time they did that, it was a completed pass. Well, from the first play of the game, they did it. They tried, but Auburn came in and sacked them. That was the first of 11 sacks on Brody Croyle in that game. But yeah, it was a crazy day for sure. That was, of course, during the 6 in a row. I'm sorry, the 6 in a row run. While Alabama was struggling, obviously, that's pretty much why we had the upper hand.
2004 against Florida. Florida was up 28-21. We drove down the field with like 3 minutes left and scored a touchdown. James Wilhoit, who's the kicker, missed the extra point. But we stopped Florida. We got the ball back with a little bit of time. And James Wilhoit, who missed the PAT, ended up making a 50-yard field goal to win the game. We ended up winning 30-28. And I'll never forget, that's still the most attended game in Neyland Stadium, like 109,000. It was just, I'll never forget that.
Probably the best game that I ever attended was actually way back in 1984. South Carolina was ranked like number 10 in the country. They took on Florida State, who was ranked like number 8, and we beat them at home. And it was on ABC, which is a big deal because most games weren't broadcast live on television back then. And we beat them we were up on them by 31 points at one time, but we ended up beating them by 12 points. Stadium was started actually shaking. It got so intense in there, and we ended up being ranked number 2 after that game was over with. So that was probably the best game I ever went to.
Well, it was life-changing actually, because it was 2012. That was the year that we went to the SEC championship game and lost to Bama, unfortunately. But my favorite player was Aaron Murray. It was crazy, man. It was a different atmosphere. I've never seen that many people in one stadium in my life. Like I said, it was life-changing, man. It's probably one of the greatest moments in my life. Probably top 5.
2022 against Indiana. Like, it snapped the long home game losing streak in conference for Rutgers, and just the way Rutgers came back and won the game was something I have not seen in a long time.
Do one that might make you mad, or
I don't care. It's completely up to you.
Vandy, Tennessee, 2016. That game, Vandy was coming in having just beat Ole Miss. They were one game off of a bowl game. It was cold, and I remember just being one of those games where, it was close. I think at halftime it was 31-24. It was a 7-point game. And then we held Tennessee to only 3 points the rest of the game. And I can remember after the game chanting 3 out of 5. It's one of those memories that is always familiar to me.
I have to go back all the way to probably 2012. West Virginia played Baylor in their first ever game as a Big 12 member. And the Mountaineers played a shootout against Baylor and set multiple records in the Big 12 itself in the very first game they played there, and the final score was 70-63, and Geno Smith threw for like 600 yards. I can't remember who Baylor's quarterback was at the time. I just know Art Briles was the head coach at Baylor at the time, and just seeing West Virginia be a top 10 team at that time and winning in a crazy shootout was just a great way to start off, probably, which was my first game as well. As a Mountaineer fan, at Milan Puskar Stadium, and it was just crazy to have that be my first ever game.
There's at least 2 or 3 that I could put on this list, but I'm gonna have to say 2015 against Notre Dame during a hurricane, and a literal hurricane. Now, it wasn't hurricane force winds in Clemson because they're further inland, but there was a hurricane in the state of South Carolina, and we drove 3.5 hours from where I live to Clemson. We were literally the only people on the road. It wasn't advisable, but that was probably the one of the best sporting events I've ever been to. Not just Clemson games. It was a top 10 matchup at the time. I can't remember the last time Notre Dame had came to Clemson before that year, and it was an epic game that came down to the end. And of course, Clemson went on to make a national championship run. Ended up losing to Alabama in the national title. But I would say the Notre Dame game in 2015.
Going against the Seminoles and whatnot, that was the only game I've gone to was the Florida State game in 2019. And that being my first game ever, and it being a primetime game, all that against one of your biggest rivals, it's unmatched. The environment is unmatched. Even if one of the opponents even if the rival is like terrible, the opponent might as well be number 2 in the country and undefeated, because that environment was electric the entire time. And like, the place was so loud the entire time. My head was hurting the next day. I mean,
we each have a favorite team, but if there was another team that you shared a mutual respect for, who would that be?
It would probably have to be maybe a team like Wake Forest, because I have family that's a fan of that team, and I've never had any reason to hate that team, and I enjoy watching them play sometimes. So
I have a little bit of respect for East Carolina. I guess I've always liked the Pirate and the colors. And
There's quite a few teams, but I think because of family, my grandparents are Penn State fans, so I got a mutual level of respect for them and like to see them have great success, because it does bring my grandparents joy, which brings me joy.
I'm going to say Kansas because they're kind of in the same boat as us, and they just like their willingness to stick through thick and thin is admirable.
It's not mutual, but I do have a love for Marshall, the Thundering Herd. Spent a lot of weekends in Huntington, West Virginia. We'd go down almost every weekend in the summer, and I spent some football weekends down there. My step-grandparents were big boosters, and a true story, my step-grandfather was supposed to be on that plane that crashed, and his wife was sick that weekend, so he decided not to go. And so that, we all know what happened that night. And right there, the plane was almost home in Huntington. It crashed right there, right at or before the airport. So,
oh, definitely the Kansas Jayhawks. They're my number 2, and have been for a very long time. Probably since I was around 14. My dad has multiple friends that went to KU. I have KU hat, all that kind of stuff, and I'm actually thinking of getting a master's at Kansas University as well, because they have a great program for what I'm getting into.
One of them is UCLA, and the reason that I like UCLA is because when I went out to Tosh Point O back in 2017, we stayed on the UCLA campus at the W Hotel. That is right there on campus, and UCLA, the campus is awesome.
I grew up around a lot of Clemson people, but I also grew up around a lot of North Carolina people. So I've, in my childhood, I always found myself rooting for the Tar Heels when I wasn't rooting for Clemson.
I would say one that I definitely have a mutual respect for is TCU. They just have a really great program, or at least as of this year, and they have a lot of grit on the field, and I can definitely respect that.
I think as much as I hate Alabama and Nick Saban, I've always kind of had a respect for what Nick Saban and Alabama have done. It's not easy to be as dominant as they've been for so long. That shows how great of a coach Nick Saban is. I mean, he's the GOAT for a reason.
Well, I respect all college teams. I mean, I know like there's a lot of trash talking that goes on amongst college football fans and things like that, but I respect all college teams and all college athletes. I mean, to even get to that level, whether you're talking about a coach or a player, is unbelievable. So I respect all the players and all the teams. As far as
Football fans have teams that they love, but they also have teams that they absolutely despise. Which team do you have the most significant amount of hatred for?
Clemson.
Clemson. 100 times Clemson. It will never not be a team that's not Clemson.
Pitt, without a doubt. I remember very vaguely, it was the 100th Backyard Brawl in 2007. West Virginia was ranked number 2 in the nation. If they would have won that game by a point, they'd be going to the national championship against Ohio State and most likely would have won. But they ended up losing the most important game, the 100th game in that entire series. Throwing a bunch of dumb mistakes in at the end in the fourth quarter just to seal the deal and lose against our biggest rival. I have respect for Pitt as a program, but I hate Pitt with a passion, and I think that rivalry is one of the most underrated in college sports.
You know, a part of football for me, college football for me, is not just loving my Yellow Jackets, but hating the Georgia Bulldogs. And I take it a step further. You know, most people just hate their rivals, whatever. I take it a step further, and I buy hats for each team that they play, and I cheer against them every week. And that's how I've always done it. I've gone to Georgia games to cheer them and hopefully watch them lose. I just really can't stand them. So,
I'd love to answer this. Well, as a Tennessee fan, I hate Alabama the most, and as an Oklahoma State fan, I hate the Oklahoma Sooners the most. So I hate Bama and OU the most.
It's tough because depending on when you ask me this, you'll get different answers. I would definitely say Georgia, mainly because of the fans.
Definitely Florida. That's one of our biggest rivals. They're the most loudest chirping fan base I've ever heard in my life. I know you probably say Georgia is or Alabama is, but to me, they're all over Twitter running their mouth. They run their mouth before the cocktail party every year. So, yeah, I definitely got to go with Florida.
I got to go with Alabama. I mean, my dad, Alabama fan. I hate Alabama, but I have a lot of respect as well because I love that rivalry, the third Saturday in October, because it's special to me because that was the one thing that me and my dad would do every year. We would, whether it was in Knoxville, whether it was in Tuscaloosa, every year we would go to the third Saturday in October together, and he'd wear his Bama stuff, wear my Tennessee stuff. But yeah, I still hate. I still want to beat them more than I want to beat anyone.
Oklahoma. It's by far and away. Can't stand them. My dad was a huge Oklahoma alum, and still can't stand them.
I have to say Penn State, this has to be obvious. They just took over the stadium. They were just so obnoxious and made me so, just resent them.
Historically, Alabama. Recently, Georgia. Throughout the whole time, Florida. So, I guess my answer would be Georgia-Flabama. Georgia-Bama.
Well, it's got to be Florida. If I ever grew up in a time where Georgia Tech was even competitive with us, it would probably be Georgia Tech. But Florida has just always been there, even though we've dominated the past few years, really since 2017. We've only lost to them once, but it has to be Florida at this
definitely.
point. South Carolina. I live on I live in Georgia, but I live on the border of South Carolina. And I talked about knowing a lot of college football fans when I was growing up. A lot of them were South Carolina fans. I don't really know the breakdown in South Carolina about where you live, if you're more likely to be a Carolina or a Clemson fan and all that. But for whatever reason, the people that live right across the border in South Carolina here tended to be mostly South Carolina fans. So every year we would always get together for the Georgia-South Carolina game and watch that game together. And if you won, you got to kind of brag to your friends for the rest of the year that you beat them. And if you lost, you had to hear about it all year. If you told me Georgia has to go 1-11 next year, something's going to happen and they're going to go 1-11, I'll say, okay, let that one win be over South Carolina. I'll take a loss to Florida and Auburn and Tennessee and Tech and all that. Let us beat South Carolina.
Auburn. Yeah. Because of the 2010 game, Nick Fairley, and I had playing dirty. I've always hated Auburn.
Well, it's South Carolina. It's not close. People outside of the state don't really understand it. And part of that has to do with the fact that South Carolina has been pretty much irrelevant in football for the majority of their existence. And so people don't take it seriously. But in this state, everybody takes it seriously.
I cannot stand the South Carolina fan base. I was at the Vandy South Carolina game this year, and I've been to two other South Carolina games. And in all three games, South Carolina fans have been rude, disrespectful, and just real obnoxious to be fans around.
Being a fan of your team falls in line with the experiences you had while being a fan. Which experience stood out to you as being the best one you ever had?
This is an interesting question because it's not an obvious answer, really. Obviously, winning the national title is great. Big wins are great. To really appreciate those things, though, you have to know what it's like not to have those things. I think 2017, to me, if I could relive like one season over and over again, it would be 2017, not 2021. And it didn't work out in the end. In 2017, we lost to Bama in that title game, but that season was completely out of the blue. It's a lot like Tennessee's season this year. You know, Tennessee is going to end up a game short because of what happened to Carolina. But when you have a season where your expectations are here and you look up in November and December and your team is sitting here, there's really not a feeling like that.
It has to be the 2005 national championship team. When we were supposed to be second fiddle to the USC Trojans, supposed to be one of the greatest teams ever assembled, you know. And for us to go in there with Vince Young and company, just go in there and, you know, rip it out of their hands and us win the national championship, that has to be one of my greatest moments as a Texas fan.
It's for when Brian Kelly decided to go for two to beat Alabama. I was at that game, you know. And I watched it. Jaden Daniels for the win. Throw to Mason Taylor. It was caught. LSU did it. And I was so happy.
I would say for me, and I hate to bring this up because of you being a Tennessee fan, but 2017 Hail Mary was not. It was like legit one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Mainly because that just doesn't happen every day. You don't see that kind of stuff.
So the one I gave you earlier is probably, if I had to pick the one singular moment, it was probably the year Tennessee beat Florida and went on to win the national championship. But the Arkansas victory that year was equally amazing. Hadn't been for a goof on the field on Arkansas's part, I don't think Tennessee would have gone to play for a national championship that year. And I was there, and it was awesome. I have been a part of the Ball Navy, so getting to see something like that's very cool. But I don't think any of those are going to be number one. I think it's probably that Florida game.
During the Bama game and after we won, because I was in like a watch party near Neyland and just seeing everybody freak out and just everybody hugging each other that didn't know anybody. That was just amazing. And when I went outside the stadium, everybody just cheering and seeing my brother after we beat them and us just flipping out because we just did something that I didn't know was ever going to happen.
It got to be a tie between watching South Carolina in 2010 take down #1 Alabama at home, or, I mean, somebody that, you know, like the previous year's national champion and someone that everybody thought was invincible, or watching them win the game in 2010 against Florida to win the SEC East, the only time they've ever done it.
In 2017, a lot of people kind of shook their heads at us and said we shouldn't have made the playoffs because we didn't win our conference. And to an extent, I agreed. But to get in the playoffs that year, make the national title game, and come back from a 20-7 deficit, second and 26 has got to be that thrilling moment for me with to Devontae Smith.
When Oklahoma State was doing so well, winning a lot of their games, except they had one loss to Iowa State. Then beat OU and Bedlam, which I love that. Made it to the Big 12 championship.
Oh, the first national championship under Dabo Swinney. Watson to Renfro in the final seconds to beat number 1 Alabama in the national championship. That's a moment that'll stick with me forever. There were so many things going into that game. You're coming off of the previous year where you fall just short to that same Alabama team, and you really felt like it kind of slipped away from you at the end. And just seeing that team rally, especially with how up and down that season was, rallying and make their way back to the national championship and getting that revenge and getting over the hump, and doing something that Clemson hadn't done in over 30 years. So that was just an incredible moment. I didn't think it would ever happen in my lifetime, but it's been a great time, especially like these last 10 years, to be a Clemson fan.
Deshaun Watson threw that pass to Hunter Renfro at the very last seconds of the game to beat Alabama. Clemson's first national championship since 1981.
The 86 Sugar Bowl was the most amazing thing. Miami fans were talking crap. The media said Tennessee had no chance in that game whatsoever. Might as well not even show up. Miami scores on their first series. They're up 7-0. Even Keith Jackson was kind of like, well, here we go. And then by the end of the night, it was 35-7 Tennessee. We beat those punks down.
Actually, the greatest moment as a Michigan fan was going to the Memorial Stadium from last year against Nebraska, at Nebraska. Boy, that was loud. And it was pretty really good game. I think one of the biggest classics I ever been to. But
I would say it was back in 2016. It was at the Battle of Bristol. I got to watch that game with my stepbrothers, and they're actually Virginia Tech fans. So when we stomped them, it was a pretty fun experience.
Probably Georgia. It was Georgia versus South Carolina back in 2012. We were ranked 6th. They were ranked 5th. Both teams were undefeated. I think College Game Day was there. Everyone thought it was going to be a good game. Even though we were literally neck and neck with Georgia coming into the game, most people were taking Georgia. And South Carolina goes out and absolutely just shuts them down. I think the final score was 35-7.
The greatest moment for me is definitely beating Alabama. No question about it. I've heard stories, of course, from my parents and my grandma about how great Tennessee used to be and how amazing Tennessee would be. They used to be looked at as like Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, as one of the top dogs in not just the SEC, but the country. Yeah, beating Alabama definitely shows that we are back at the top of the charts. It shows that we are back. It shows that we're being competitive again. Josh Heupel has definitely brought life back into this football team, and I'm very, very thankful for Josh Heupel, man.
Probably going to my first playoff game back in 2019, before all of the craziness of pandemic and COVID and all that. And I got to witness arguably the best quarterback in college football history, Joe Burrow, in person.
In recent memory, it has to be the 2018 Texas game. I was a freshman in high school at the time, and just seeing West Virginia go in there to a hostile Texas environment when Texas looked like they were about to be back, and go in there and break any chances of them for the playoffs or anything, felt great to me. The greatest feeling that I probably felt as a Mountaineer fan.
Obviously, when we won the national championship, now to take away that obvious one, the 2017 season when Sony Michel won the Rose Bowl.
Oh yeah, the greatest moment ever was obviously beating Alabama in the
national championship, third Ringo, the pick six that, sealed the game. Yeah.
It's got to be the Rose Bowl in 2017 because, like, growing up as a Georgia fan, we were always good but never great. We never took that next step to be like a national championship contending team until the 2017 season.
Most Georgia fans would say the national championship, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say 2017 or 2018 Rose Bowl, coming back and beating an amazing Oklahoma team and shutting Baker Mayfield up.
As a fan, there will always be some good times, but along with that, there are going to be some bad, some even awful ones. Which experience would you consider as being the worst that you had to witness?
Man, there's been some pretty bad moments. 2001 SEC Championship game against LSU, being like 12 years old, and I remember we were, my parents saying, "Hey, look, we're going to go to the Rose Bowl." They're basically telling us, like, of course we beat LSU. Well, that's going to be everybody's Christmas. We're going to go to Pasadena and go watch Tennessee play for another, for a national championship in the Rose Bowl. Because I was like, the Rose Bowl, the Granddaddy All. Even then, at that age, I'm like, we've never won one of those, a Rose Bowl. This would be probably one of the biggest wins of ever. And, it was going to be against like Miami, which I don't know if we would have won that game. And then going in the SEC Championship game, being heavily favored. We'd already beat them once that year. Having the team that we had and just absolutely letting a backup quarterback. We knocked Rohan Davey out of the game. Backup quarterback comes in and just basically runs all over us, and we ended up just losing that game. It was devastating.
Being a Georgia Tech fan has been overall a pretty miserable experience, at least lately. I would say my most miserable I've been is actually recently, when it was last year. The entirety of last year was the absolute worst year of football possibly ever for me, because in the same year, I got really, really excited whenever we finally moved on from Paul Johnson and stopped running the triple option every year. And I was really invested in our new coach and finally getting into a new system and getting talent and everything like that. And unfortunately, the first 2 years under Jeff Collins were very rough. So the third year, I was expecting, we had a great roster. We had tons of talent. Believe it or not, we didn't play like we had good talent, but we did. And I came into the season with sky-high expectations, and it all was dashed in a moment as the Yellow Jackets lose to Northern Illinois at home, a team that had not won a single game the year before. And that was crushing. And then, of course, that very same year, Jahmyr Gibbs, one of my favorite players in recent memory, transferred out, and Georgia won the national championship. A complete nightmare.
If we're going by like heartbreaking moments, obviously the 2017 national championship comes to mind there. So it could be games like that, those are just a couple that come to mind. I don't know really if I can put one above all the others.
I think the worst one was probably against Clemson in 2016, I think it was. We lost 56-7 to Clemson in Death Valley. We were coming into the game thinking we might have a chance. We were hyping ourselves up, and we just go out and, literally, I have not seen us get dominated like we did that game. At that point, I had not seen us get dominated like that ever by anyone that I could remember.
I'd have to say 2018 against Buffalo. Just looking like somberly at about like 3 o'clock in the afternoon after a noon game against Buffalo, where we got just absolutely our doors blown off, just staring into the abyss. Like, is this how far our program has gone down?
One of them is 2014 Auburn, Mississippi State. First play of the game, I remember it was an interception.
second play of our offensive game or possession or whatever, we fumble it or whatever happened. They go up 14-0, and then they go on to win the game. We almost made a comeback, and but it didn't really hurt our playoff chances. That was until a few weeks later against Texas A&M. I was at that game, and I cannot believe I was. I remember before halftime, Auburn's lining up to kick a field goal. A&M comes out, they block it, they return it all the way back for a touchdown, and then later on during Auburn made a comeback. They're down by 14, I think. They come back, and they're at the 35-yard line, A&M territory. We fumble the ball, and right there, I knew, oh my God, we just gave this season away.
Clemson has had its fair share of letdowns in my lifetime, but nothing like still hurts me more, and nothing like just really that crushes my soul than the 2013 Florida State loss. It was top 5 matchup in Death Valley.
The 2013 beatdown that we took at the hands of Florida State in Clemson.
Jameis Winston, who eventually won the Heisman, won the national championship that year. Coming in, Clemson was the favored team, and Clemson had brought back in a really experienced team. Taj Boyd in his final year, they had, Clemson had all these weapons on offense, and a lot of people picked Clemson. They thought this was the year that Clemson would get over the hump and kind of surpass Florida State as the kings of the ACC. And I thought we legitimately had a shot at a national championship that year. And, I was just really excited for that game. And Florida State absolutely mollywopped Clemson. Final score 51-14. It was over from the opening snap. The first snap of the game goes over Taj Boyd's head, and they turn the ball over. And it was just all downhill from there.
I hate the previous flop. The punt for the Michigan State-Michigan game. I forgot what year, but I think it was 2017.
I think it was 2015.
Yeah, 2015. I forgot what year, but yeah, man, that was hurtful.
It's not really a moment. It's more of a time period. From 2013 to the 2016 season, Purdue had a coach by the name of Darrell Hazel. It's one of those hires where, okay, this guy has been winning at a lower level of competition, so let's give this guy a shot. There's plenty of hires, and Tennessee with Josh Heupel, that can be a prime example. He's at this Group of 5 program where he's winning 9-10 games a year with Central Florida after Scott Frost leaves. Let's give this guy a shot. That's what Purdue did. And from 2013 to 2016, didn't win more than 3 games.
Losing to Troy. And I was like, when I found out that LSU lost to Troy, I lost my mind.
I got to go back to 2013, man. That kick 6 still haunts me and, still leaves a bad taste in my mouth. When Chris Davis caught the ball, you're thinking, oh my gosh, what's he going to do now? We better stop this. But as soon as he turned the corner, Alabama had a hard time stopping him, knew they couldn't, and that was the end of it. But that's just one of those moments and key losses that always sticks with you.
This entire year as a whole, as a Mountaineer fan, because this is the worst season we've had since probably the 70s. It's been that bad. We haven't had losing years in the past 2 to 3 years.
But I have to say last year, when we were up 24, 25 points on Oklahoma at halftime and come out and they ended up beating us in that game, just kind of dejected, just took the life out of our program and went on a 6-game losing skid, and kind of sucked the soul out of our team last year.
I guess the most recent one is probably the loss to South Carolina. I think Tennessee destroyed their season.
Probably that recent South Carolina game, just because it just felt lost after like the second quarter, and plus that might be, I hope it's not, but it might be the last time we contend for a college football playoff. I don't think if it actually is, but if it is, then that's gonna hurt so badly.
And it was such a significant blow to that team in the program. I mean, they were ranked number 5. They had an absolutely, I think, probability of being in the Final Four, and playing for a chance to go to a national championship. And I think that's all completely over now. So that one was pretty painful.
I can't really pick like a certain moment. So I'm going to just say the whole year of 2013. It would have to be that. Honestly, it sucked because it was like my second year watching football, and I was like, dude, my team is garbage. What's going on here?
I went to a Georgia, who were they? I think they were playing Georgia Southern. This has got to be 25 years ago. And I was in the upper deck, but I was on the first row of the upper deck, and it poured the entire game. And you know how bleachers are, they're concrete. So all that rain funnels down. I'm sitting on the first row, and like literally every minute that goes by, you can see the water under my feet getting higher and higher and higher and higher and higher, to the point where like by the third quarter of the game, I'm up to like the middle of my calves in water. That was miserable.
The many losses inexplicably to LSU, or the 2015 Florida State game in which a sellout crowd watched us score 2 points the entire game.
The Oklahoma game back in whatever year it was, Butch Jones was here. We jumped on him early, should have won the game, but he wussed out and went conservative, and they came back and tied it and won. Actually, came back and won the game late. And what made that game so miserable is I was sitting up in the Oklahoma section in the south end zone upper deck, and there were some young Tennessee fans there beside me that were drunk, talking crap to and these were older Oklahoma fans, talking crap to them, and just made their time miserable there, made my time miserable there. So that was a pretty bad moment.
I'm gonna go with 2012 SEC championship, losing at like the 5-yard line and running out of time because Mark Richt didn't know how to manage the clock, and Aaron Murray went to attend the national championship and beat Notre Dame that year. So yeah, 2012 SEC title for sure.
It's kind of hard to pick one.
Yeah, you got to think hard about it. There's a lot to choose from.
Yeah. But honestly, if I had to pick one, even though I didn't actually see the game, I'd probably have to pick the loss to Georgia State. I was ashamed to be wearing my Tennessee orange that day. I was ashamed to be a Tennessee fan. I was absolutely ashamed of this football team.
You probably don't want to hear this, but I would have to say what happens leading up to a rivalry game. I think the black eye for the sport of college football, and especially in the SEC, was the Harvey Updike situation. For those of you who don't know, Harvey Updike, because Auburn beat Alabama in 2010, he goes down, Harvey Updike is an Alabama fan, he goes down to Auburn and poisons the trees down there at, I think it's Toomer's Corner, I think that's how you say it, and just absolutely kills those trees because your team got beat. I'm like, dude, come on. Really? And that stuff like that is definitely a black eye for the sport.
Paxton Brooks to hold. Chase McGrath.
Here we go.
For the win for the Volunteers. From 40. Yes!
College football has led so many people into something that they can truly be passionate about. As a nationwide community, we all share the same passions of the sport. What about the college football community do you think is so special to those in and around it?
I think any community, by its definition, is going to be people who, whatever else they think whatever else they believe, they're a part of that community because that is either a hobby or a passion or something that they hold pretty dear. They're willing to devote a good chunk of their time to it. Their interest is there. So I think communities like that are a lot of fun because if it's done right, the rest of whatever you think about and believe and care about and hold dear can kind of take a back seat to whatever it is you're in that community for. If you're part of a college football fandom community, it doesn't really have to matter what your politics are. It doesn't really have to matter whatever other things are that you would completely disagree with all the rest of the people in that group. You can unite around the fact that you're college football fans. And so I always think it's important for everybody to have groups like that.
Which is the way I think it's definitely growing. It's just watching people just come together just from out of the woodwork, whether it's like just, hey, I happened upon this YouTube video and all of a sudden like that's what happened with me. Like years ago, like probably like 5, 6, 7 years ago, I happened upon some college football videos, and here I am a part of this like community, like been a part of this community here on YouTube, for example. I never thought I'd meet people like this on ever. I mean, none of my wildest dreams. It's like, and it's just like it just all of a sudden just happened, and that's something I just think is just, I mean, it's just amazing to me, especially like just like with how like the community's just grown just on the internet, not even just in real life too. I mean, I've made all sorts of friends from it in real life as well. I mean, it's just if you're looking for something that you can. It's just if you enjoy the competitive nature of it, but also something, even though you may be against each other, you're also with each other just because you share a common want for whatever team you pull for. I mean, it's great. I mean, if you aren't a part of this community already, come and join it.
We can share a little bit of our life, and when we do that, we're sharing our time with one another, whether it's something we both have in common, like football or sports or whatever it may be. And it's just, people see other people on here having fun, and maybe this helps people with their social skills. Maybe this helps people making friends. Maybe this helps people get through their day. And it's just a fun place where you can have a good time.
Of course, the college football community, it's awesome talking with other people about college football. I've definitely made some friends online, of course. I mean, another thing that really pulled me, it is also you, kind of. Your 2019 video about Georgia State, when you made that, it was actually a pretty funny rage video. You throwing your trash can against the wall, and you was like, so, what are we going to do this time, ball fans? Just the nice people. These are genuinely nice people in this community. Of course, there's some bad people, too. There's some people who just genuinely suck. I'm not gonna point in any names or anything, but just the people.
All right, so I would say the best part about the community is just y'all talking about college football on YouTube and everything, and I would say your YouTube channel is actually the best part of the college football community, because you always because almost every year you almost like make like football videos and football preview predictions and everything, and you make football reactions whenever your team wins or loses. I would say that's what makes a good part about the best part about the college football community.
It's the small people that come in this community. It's even the commenters, man, because without the commenters, we wouldn't have nothing to do. We'd just be talking to ourselves. So it's definitely the people. I love the people in the community. The community, man, the community is just amazing. People, just the smaller people that count in my book.
I didn't know that there were so many people like myself who had the same drive and the same interest and the level of interest that they've had in college football. I just didn't know that this outlet was out there. I've met guys like Uncle Lou, who's big in the community and really the pioneer of the community. and a pioneer like you. And I've met some people from the voice of college football like D4 and Matty Sims and Jordan Bowman and Tony Altimore. And so it's just the friendships that I've made, and and another thing is meeting people who are a fan of your team. When you go to a game, you always get talking, sitting to the people next to you, and you go on social media and collaborate with people that are a fan of your team, and it's just amazing. I just didn't know there were so many people out here that had the same interest and same drive for being a college football fan that I did.
It's just so much pageantry, it's just a tradition. I've just had so many memories growing up throughout my life, 32, and it seems like all the great memories of my life growing up as a kid and everything have always been tied to college football. Going to Knoxville, going to all over the Southeastern Conference, going to some bowl games. I mean, college football is such a big part of my life that, we plan vacations around it, family vacations and stuff. I mean, it's just what we do. It's a part of my family. It's a family tradition, watching the Vols. Whether that's at Neyland Stadium, that's, in here in the living room, it's a pride thing, and even though we might be cheering for different teams, we're at the end of the day, we're all doing it the same way, basically.
Just being able to talk with people within other states, getting to know like their culture and all that, because probably going to away games and like seeing like how they do stuff, it's just amazing to see their atmosphere and everything like that.
Got to witness a lot of game atmospheres, and got to witness some big plays like that 7 overtime game. Basically storm the field. I don't really care.
I love being a part of the community that thrives in trash talk. You're with your one base, and this happened throughout. Like before we played Pitt, months before we played Pitt, which this game should be played the last game of the year. I 100% agree that it should be the last game of the year, but having it be the first time in 10 years that two programs went off, you could just see the hatred in each other still being there, which you wouldn't expect to be there from a quote-unquote dead rivalry, but it was there, and it was loud. And after the game, both schools had the receipts, both fan bases had the receipts, and it's just hate that you just love to see. And with that, if another quote-unquote smaller rival like Virginia Tech started bringing up 13-9 or something like that to us, which that was the score of the 2007 Backyard Brawl, which we hate, and they started bringing that up, and Pitt fans started slandering them for saying, hey, that's our thing, get your own thing, you castrated turkeys, and which is hilarious. And the same thing happened when both when West Virginia and Pitt played Virginia Tech, because they're both rivals of those fan bases, and both Pitt and West Virginia fans were saying, hey, good luck, beat the castrated turkeys and chop their non-existent balls off. And it was just a great thing to see, and I think that's what makes the rivalry so great anyways. Like, you see this with the Iron Bowl, you see this with Tennessee Vandy, you see this with the Apple Cup, you see this with the game with Michigan and Ohio State. You just see it everywhere, and I think rivalry is just what makes it so great.
Well, I mean, it's great. I do, think of you and, all the people, in this community as my friends, Of course, we do some of us do like the, Slav Olympics every year, where we all get to, meet up, and it's just, a lot of fun. I feel like there's a lot of, really strong, community, here. Yeah.
I think the community of college football is the greatest sports community out there. I mean, you look at just the camaraderie between fan bases and everybody in that fan base, and the rivalries between, Georgia, Florida, Alabama, Auburn. You know, the fact that those fans hate each other's guts. It's just everything about college football and the way the fan bases are, and the way the community is just it's partly what makes it the greatest sport out there. And another thing about the college football community that benefited me so much in my life is I've met some of my closest friends through college football and the community, you know, looking for college football YouTubers to watch, and enjoying college football YouTubers to watch and pay attention to, has led me to meeting some of people who I would say is my closest friends. So college football has made, and the college football community as a whole, made a huge impact on my life.
I think that you get a lot of banter and back and forth, and you get a lot of and I think that that not necessarily hostility, but just disagreement in general, between differing opinions, differing members of different groups, is just something that just draws people in. And that makes being able to come, because, you know, it's not always just talking about facts and figures and who did this and who did that last week. It's also a lot of well, we're going to get you next week, or, you know, we're going to get you next year. Yeah, a lot of back and forth. And I think a lot of people are just able to just blow off a little bit of steam.
Well, for many people, it has to do with where they live, you know, especially if you live in the deep South. It's just the thing down here. It's bigger than anything else, any other sport. And I think that just naturally attracts people on its own. And again, for other reasons I listed earlier, like the tradition, the passion, the just everything about it is, I can see why it attracts people. And I've only become a bigger fan every single year. So I can see why so many people just gravitate towards it.
There are so many traditions in college football and in college sports, I'll also add, that's so memorable. Where are you going to find the same pride, the same type of atmosphere, the same, you know, the crowd's yelling when your team's on defense? Where are you going to find that same atmosphere and all those traditions? Where are you going to find that in the National Football League, in the NFL? Where? I mean, you don't see that at Mercedes-Benz Stadium in Atlanta. You don't see that at Nissan Stadium. You don't see that at the Patriots Stadium over in Foxborough. You don't see that. The only place you can see all of that is if you're watching college sports or college football.
Well, definitely the unity in getting behind one team. There's a large sense of tribalism that goes into what team you root for. Like, for example, like, if you've seen tailgates, and you undoubtedly have, like, there's just so many people who are just will talk to complete strangers and say, go insert team name here. And everyone's just kind of beating their chest about it. Like, oh, this is going to be a great game day, you know?
It's a common bond. That's an easy one. We all have that common bond of the passion, again, that we have for college football. Nope, we don't all root for the same teams. You know, if we have rivals that we get to talk smack to ahead of time. We have rivals that, like Alabama, for at least a year, they can't say a word to us. Yeah, they can throw up 15 in a row, but that doesn't matter now because it's 1 in a row for Tennessee. Things like that, you know, just the common bond Absolutely. We all share.
Is the reactions of us, because, for example, not because I'm not gonna, you know, Lou, don't get this the wrong way, but for example, like Lou will smash a TV with a hammer after Georgia Tech lost in, I forgot what year, but that doesn't matter. That's just for example. That's why
people liking the community, because it's just a whole family that loves college football, and we love the people over here. So
I think that we all have something in common. We're all crazy in our own way, irrational when it comes to sports, super fans, as you will, because, you know, college football has got the shortest season in major sports. It's only 4 months long. And so 8 months out of the year, there's no games to be played. But in this community, these people show up year round, not just during the season. And so I think that alone makes this community special. And the fact that we can all, well, not all. I mean, look, there's some things that happen on here that are not good. We've all seen it, but that's going to be expected. But for the most part, we can all joke with each other and crack on each other, and nobody's feelings really get hurt. Sometimes things get a little bit personal, and they shouldn't. But again, like I said, that's kind of the natural thing when especially with the internet. But it's a pretty close-knit group of people. I mean, even the people. Like, for instance, me and you, like, I've known of you a long time. You've known of me a long time. We haven't really had a lot of conversations, but I still consider, but Squidtard is still like a prominent member in the community in my mind. You know what I mean? And that's the way it is. Whether you're a content creator or just a viewer or a subscriber, everybody contributes to the greater cause.
Just the hype and the rivalry and the excitement that everybody gets for their football teams. It's great. It really is.
Well, college football has allowed me to meet a lot of amazing people, both personally and online. And I've been allowed to express my fandom to other people and share fandoms and traditions with other people. And it's opened up a lot of opportunities for me, and it's been a blessing. Without football, honestly, without the fandom and stuff like that, I don't know where I'd be. As heated as it gets sometimes, and some of the dumb things I've said in online and stuff like that, man, it's very fun. I enjoy it a lot, and like I said, don't know where I'd be without it.
It unifies so many different people, and you know, there's no age requirement, there's no this, that, prerequisites to be a college football fan. It's a lifestyle almost, and when you share a common interest like that, it brings together so many people, and that's what's truly special. And you can trash talk and be at each other's throats and all that, but at the end of the day, you're still a community, and you still love the same thing. And that's kind of what I've gotten out of it. I've just made so many friends through football, and that's kind of the best part.
It just brings a smile to my face. I'm not just an Alabama fan. I'm a big college football fan in general, and just to see a pigskin going through the air, to see defensive backs hit hard, man, there's just something about it that just brings a lot of passion and joy and energy, and I have a lot of pride for that. To watch that stuff unfold on TV, it's history, and some people out there that aren't into sports or into college football just don't get it, and it's very hard to describe. All I know is that it brings a lot of excitement and joy just to watch a football game. We just get along, and it's just great to be part of such a great community that I could call family, and just people to get along with that can get along with me as well, and hopefully these are people I hold on to the rest of my life.
I enjoy seeing all of these different people all around the country from different regions. I've made plenty of friends from watching YouTube, and all you guys that we talk to that I've known for a few years. It's definitely a community, a large community, and a lot of people come together just for the love of the sport. So
I think it's the art of the game.
when it comes down to it, so many people are like-minded when it comes to that. You have your casual fans, you have your diehards. I prefer to be around the diehards that actually know what they're talking about. So in this football community, especially on YouTube, a lot of people have a lot of vast knowledge of the game, and it's very nice to sit there and talk to these people that are like-minded like yourself and find a community within your life, or as a pastime, as a hobby, all that good stuff, to be able to talk to these people and they know what you're talking about, instead of Joe Schmo down the road. You're like, hey, did you see the game the other day? And he's like, I don't really watch college football.
What you end up seeing a lot with college football fans is, in professional sports, you may see people bandwagon, but there's not really a lot of bandwagon fans in college football. You see a lot of people ride or die with their teams, and I'm not as active on the YouTube community as I used to be, but I am active on the Facebook community, and you see a lot of people strut their stride up there, and I don't know, it's fun to watch and look at.
I guess what attracts them is seeing people do something that they can't, like seeing people make like unbelievable achievements on the field and just achieve greatness. And I feel like that's something that a lot of people strive for, and seeing that happen makes people think like, oh, if they can do that on the field, then I can do whatever I want to do. If someone is able to achieve a record or just anything like that, then what's stopping me from doing what I want to do?
I've seen a lot of communities on the internet, and a lot of them are so big. Like, gaming is such a huge pull or whatever, and there's so many people interested in that. What's cool about this one is that it's really personal, and everybody knows everybody, and they're very welcoming, and the fact that we can talk trash and just absolutely go in on each other, and then the next day hang out and be friends and be adults about it is really special. Some of the events that we've had, and we have met up in real life and had events where we get together and stuff like that, have been some of the most fun events I've ever gone to, had the pleasure of attending. And it's just the community, the acceptingness. There's not a more diverse group of people than the college football community. You think that it's a bunch of like southern, like maybe redneck people, but no, it's hugely diverse, and there are people on here with completely different ideas, ways of life. They live in different places, they live all around the world, but we have one thing in common. And even if you don't know somebody, you hop right on here, start talking to them, and it's like you've been friends for years.
I think it's a combination of a couple of things. I think once you become a diehard college football fan, it's an emotional investment that you're making into that team. People get upset when their teams lose. People get happy when their teams win. It's become a joke, but you've got like wives who will distance themselves from their husbands for 24 hours when their husband's college football team loses. So it's a very emotional sport, and as a fan, like when I talk about Georgia, I use the word we. But I don't have anything to do with Georgia, but I say my team. Like if I'm meeting you and I want to know what college football team you root for, I say, hey, who's your team? And you say, my team is Tennessee. My team is Georgia. My team is out. It's not your team. But we develop this emotional attachment to the team where we feel like we're a part of it, right? So when you meet other diehard college football fans, they're operating under that same emotional attachment to their team. So right away, you've got like a connection with that person. And this can be your next door neighbor, the guy you work with, somebody you go to school with, or it can be somebody you only know from the internet or from YouTube that lives 6 states away that you've never actually met. But you know right away, if they're a diehard college football fan, you're going to have that connection. And it makes it makes the college football community, whether you're talking about in real life or on YouTube or whatever, it makes it a tight-knit community. I can hate South Carolina like I hate nothing else, and love Carolina Jackpot as a South Carolina fan, or any other South Carolina fan. It's really it's a unique experience to be involved in such a big group where everyone is so emotionally invested in something that they literally have nothing to do with. Nothing. No decision I make, nothing I say, nothing I post on the internet, no amount of ranting or raving or yelling or screaming that I do is going to have 1 ounce of impact on anything the Georgia Bulldogs football team or program does. None. But you can't tell me that. I act like I'm just as much a part of it as the coach, the quarterback, the trainers, the weight staff, everybody. You feel like you're a part of it. And every other diehard college football fan feels the same way. If they don't, then they're just not a diehard college football fan, and that's fine. I'm not using that as an insult. There are a lot of casual fans, but then you've got the diehard, and that's what I'm talking about here. The people that are following recruiting in May. The people that get upset because someone decommits, some senior in high school who's not even going to contribute anything to the team for another 2 or 3 years by the time they redshirt and all that. And that's a unique kind of, it's a unique experience to have. And it's one that, unless you've had an experience like that, whether it's with college football or something else, it's hard to really describe or explain. In general, though, everybody has that core thing in common, and in this case it's college football, and because it's such an emotional investment you make as a fan, it makes it easy to develop friendships with other people that understand that emotional attachment.
(2015), the year that I became fully invested in college football. At the time, it was just something you could spend the week watching and enjoy while doing something else. Of course, every fan has that beginning. Over time, if you spend enough time watching college football, it won't be long until you become one of us. Each and every person I interviewed had a different reason to watch, a different story about something that they became so passionate about. And if you came into this video and have no clue how to even play a game of football, much less know what steps to take to become a fan, well, I've got good news for you. You've already taken your first step. Listening to all these different stories and being here, soon enough, you'll pave your way to yours. That is exactly what college football means to us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.